No one noticed the proud CEO, until the janitor smiled and said, "You seem sad today." The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Mel Brock Hotel penthouse office, casting golden geometric patterns across Celeste Davenport's mahogany desk. At 25, she commanded an empire her late father had built from nothing, 43 hotels across the United States, each one a testament to the Davenport legacy. She stood by the window in her signature royal blue blazer and denim shorts, blue heels clicking softly against Italian marble as she surveyed the bustling Miami beachfront below. Her blonde hair caught the light, her sun-bronzed skin glowing with the kind of perfection that graced magazine covers. But her blue eyes held something the cameras never captured, a profound, aching emptiness. "Ms. Davenport, the board meeting starts in 15 minutes. Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Celeste didn't respond immediately. She pressed her fingertips against the cool glass, watching tiny figures move along the beach, couples holding hands, families building sandcastles, friends laughing, normal people with normal lives, people who went home to someone who asked about their day, people who didn't eat dinner alone in a 12,000-square-foot mansion that echoed with every footstep. "Ms. Davenport? I heard you, Jennifer. I'll be there." She turned from the window, her reflection catching in the glass. Beautiful, successful, untouchable. That was what the Forbes article had called her last month. The untouchable heiress. They meant it as a compliment, describing her business acumen and immunity to corporate sharks. They didn't know how accurate the word really was, how long it had been since anyone had touched her, really touched her in a way that mattered. The divorce from Marcus had been finalized 8 months ago, a sterile proceeding where lawyers did most of the talking, and two people who once promised forever couldn't meet each other's eyes. He'd wanted the Davenport money and connections. She'd wanted to believe someone could love her for herself. Both had been disappointed. Celeste gathered her leather portfolio and headed toward the private elevator. The executive floor was quiet this early. She always arrived before sunrise, leaving after dark, filling the hollow hours with work, because at least spreadsheets and acquisition deals didn't require emotional vulnerability. At least numbers made sense. The elevator descended smoothly, and she stepped out into the main lobby. The Mel Brock Miami was the crown jewel of the collection. Art Deco elegance meets modern luxury, where international celebrities and business moguls paid $5,000 a night for the privilege of saying they'd stayed here. Crystal chandeliers worth more than most people's houses cast prismatic light across marble floors polished to mirror brightness. And there, pushing an industrial cleaning cart across that impossibly perfect floor, was a man in a blue maintenance uniform. Celeste had seen him before, one of the new hires from last month, she assumed. Maintenance staff were practically invisible to most guests, and Celeste had to admit shamefully that they'd become invisible to her too over the years. When you commanded an empire, you stopped noticing the people who made the empire function, but something made her notice him today. Maybe it was the way he moved, not with the hurried efficiency of someone trying to finish a task, but with a strange dignity, as if pushing a mop was work worthy of pride. Maybe it was the yellow gloves contrasting against the blue uniform, somehow both humble and bright. Or maybe it was the way he paused to help an elderly guest who'd dropped her room key, speaking to her with genuine warmth, making her laugh about something. He had dark hair slightly too long for corporate standards, curling at his collar, broad shoulders that spoke of physical work, not gym memberships. And when he straightened up from helping the woman, Celeste caught a glimpse of his profile. Strong jaw, kind eyes, a face weathered by experience, but not hardened by it. Their eyes met for just a second across the vast lobby. He nodded respectfully, not obsequiously, not with the nervous deference most employees showed her, but with simple acknowledgement. One human being seeing another. Then Celeste's phone buzzed. "Where are you?" Jennifer's text demanded. "Board members are asking." She tore her gaze away and hurried toward the conference wing. But something about that brief moment stayed with her through 3 hours of contentious debate about expansion into the European market, through a working lunch where she barely tasted the Chilean sea bass, through afternoon conference calls with investors who saw her as a balance sheet, not a person. When she finally returned to her office near 6 p.m., exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness, she found the space transformed. Her coffee cup had been removed, the trash emptied, the windows cleaned to impossible clarity. Fresh flowers sat in the crystal vase on her desk, not the formal orchids the hotel decorator usually placed there, but simple wildflowers someone had arranged with unexpected artistry. A small note card leaned against the vase, handwritten in careful script. Thought these might brighten your day. Maintenance. Celeste stared at the flowers for a long time. When was the last time someone had done something for her that wasn't transactional, that didn't expect anything in return except maybe her day being slightly less dark? She sank into her chair, something unfamiliar prickling behind her eyes. She couldn't cry. Hadn't cried since the divorce, hadn't cried at her father's funeral 2 years ago, hadn't cried when Marcus told her he'd never loved her. Just the idea of being Mr. Celeste Davenport. She'd built walls too high for tears, but the wildflowers on her desk made those walls feel suddenly thin. The next morning, Celeste arrived at 7 a.m. instead of her usual 6. She told herself it was because she'd actually slept past 5 for once, but the truth sat uncomfortably in her chest. She was hoping to see the maintenance worker again. She found him in the West Wing corridor, methodically waxing the hardwood floors. His blue uniform was spotless despite the labor, and she noticed for the first time that he wore his yellow gloves like they were part of him, not ashamed of the work, but owning it completely. A small radio played something classical, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, which seemed incongruous for a man waxing floors at dawn. "Good morning," Celeste said, her voice coming out softer than intended. He looked up, and for the second time their eyes met. His were brown, warm as earth, and held something she couldn't quite identify. Recognition? No, that wasn't possible. She'd have remembered him. "Good morning, Miss Davenport." He straightened, respectful but not subservient. "I hope the flowers weren't too forward yesterday. I noticed you seemed—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Like you could use something beautiful that wasn't perfectly arranged by committee." A laugh escaped her. Actual, genuine laughter that felt rusty from disuse. "Is that what you think my life is? Committee-arranged beauty? I think you're surrounded by perfection that's been calculated and purchased," he said simply. "Sometimes wildflowers that cost nothing matter more than orchids that cost everything." The observation was so accurate it felt invasive. Celeste's defenses rose automatically. "That's quite philosophical for—" She gestured at his uniform, immediately regretting the dismissive tone, but he didn't bristle. His mouth curved in a slight smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "For a janitor, we have a lot of time to think while we work. Clean floors, clear mind." Thoreau had similar ideas, though he preferred a pond to a mop bucket. You read Thoreau. It wasn't a question, but a statement of surprise she couldn't hide. "And Emerson, and currently working through Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. The library is free, Miss Davenport. Wisdom doesn't require a corner office." The gentle rebuke hit its mark. Celeste felt heat rise to her cheeks, something that hadn't happened in years. When did she become the kind of person who equated job titles with human worth? When did she forget that some of the most extraordinary people she'd known growing up had been ordinary workers? The mechanic who'd taught her father everything about engines, the hotel cook who'd made her soup when she was sick, the housekeeper who'd listened to her teenage heartbreaks. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. That was condescending. "It was honest," he replied. "Most people with your position don't even notice people with mine. The fact that you stopped to apologize says you're not most people. I'm not sure that's true anymore." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of sadness, of understanding, of something deeper she couldn't identify. "I don't believe that. I think you're exactly who you've always been, you've just forgotten." The strange intimacy of the statement unsettled her. "You don't know me." Maybe not, but his eyes suggested otherwise. "Though I do know you looked profoundly sad yesterday morning. So sad it made me want to pick wildflowers from the empty lot next door. So sad I've been wondering about it ever since." Celeste's breath caught. When was the last time anyone had seen her sadness? Marcus had been oblivious. Her board members saw only strength or weakness as it affected their portfolios. Jennifer managed her schedule but not her heart. Even her mother on their monthly obligation calls asked about business performance, not emotional well-being. "I should go," Celeste said, because this conversation was becoming too real, too vulnerable, too dangerous. "Thank you for the flowers." "You're welcome, and Miss Davenport?" He waited until she looked back. "Whatever's making you sad, it's temporary. Pain always is. Even the deepest kind eventually transforms into something else. Usually wisdom, sometimes strength, occasionally even joy. You sound very certain about that." "I am. Experience is a thorough teacher." Celeste walked away feeling strangely shaken, as if the brief exchange had rearranged something fundamental inside her. She spent the morning distracted during a video conference with the London office, her mind returning repeatedly to brown eyes that saw too much, and a gentle voice that offered philosophical comfort instead of empty platitudes. At lunch, she did something unprecedented. She called HR. Jennifer, I need the personnel file for one of our maintenance workers. Which one, Miss Davenport? Good question. She realized she didn't even know his name. The one who works morning shift in the executive wing. Dark hair, blue uniform. A pause. That's Ryan Walker. He started 4 weeks ago. Former military, excellent references. Spotless background check. Is there a problem? No problem, thank you. Ryan Walker. The name resonated like a distant bell. Familiar, but she couldn't place why. Celeste pulled up his file on her computer. Limited information. Previous address in Orlando. Employment history showing various maintenance and mechanical jobs. Honorable discharge from the Navy 6 years ago. The photo on his application showed the same kind eyes, the same quiet dignity. But something nagged at her. Something about the name, about his face, about the way he'd looked at her as if he knew her already. She spent the afternoon trying to focus on acquisition contracts for a boutique hotel chain in California, but her mind kept wandering. At 5 p.m., instead of working until 9 as usual, she found herself walking toward the parking garage, not the executive level where her Mercedes waited in its reserved spot, but the employee level, a place she'd literally never been in 5 years of running the hotel. She told herself she was being ridiculous, told herself this was inappropriate interest in an employee, told herself she was CEO of a billion-dollar company and had no business seeking out a maintenance worker like some lovesick teenager, but her feet kept walking until she reached the employee section, and there, parked under a flickering fluorescent light, was a blue Harley-Davidson motorcycle. Not new, not showroom perfect, but clearly loved. Every chrome piece polished, the leather seat worn but meticulously maintained. It was beautiful in its imperfection, in its obvious history. She's a 1998 fat boy. Ryan's voice came from behind her. Bought her broken from a junkyard 7 years ago. Rebuilt her myself, piece by piece. Celeste turned. He'd changed out of his uniform into jeans and a plain white t-shirt that showed muscled arms marked with small scars, the kind you got from working with your hands, from rebuilding engines and fixing broken things. He looked different outside the context of work, more himself somehow. I didn't mean to intrude, Celeste said. I was just admiring her. It's okay. She's worth admiring. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but she runs true. Never let me down. He approached the bike, running his hand over the chrome with unmistakable affection. Sometimes the most reliable things in life aren't the ones that cost the most. They're the ones you invest yourself in, the ones you rebuild with your own hands. Was he still talking about the motorcycle? Do you ride? Ryan asked. I've never been on a motorcycle. His eyebrows rose. Never? A woman who runs an empire hasn't experienced one of life's simplest freedoms? I've been busy or hiding. The question landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. What's that supposed to mean? Ryan leaned against his bike, studying her with those two perceptive eyes. You're one of the richest, most powerful women in the country. You can go anywhere, do anything, have almost anything. But you come to work before sunrise and leave after dark. You eat lunch at your desk alone. You stood in your office yesterday morning looking at the beach like someone watching life through a window instead of living it. That's not busy, Miss Davenport. That's hiding. You're very presumptuous for someone who's worked here less than a month. Maybe, or maybe I recognize a fellow hider. I spent 2 years after the Navy living in a one-room apartment, doing nothing but work and sleep, telling myself I was being responsible and stable. Really, I was just afraid of wanting more, of risking more, of feeling more. It's easier to hide in routine than to actually live. And what changed? A shadow crossed his face. I realized I was wasting the life I'd been given, that I had people who'd loved me who would be disappointed to see me just existing. So I made a choice to do something different. Working maintenance at a hotel? Living, he corrected gently. This job pays my bills, but it doesn't define me. I read philosophy. I rebuild engines. I ride my bike along the coast road at sunset and feel grateful to be alive. I notice when beautiful, sad women stand alone in the morning light and need someone to see them. That's living, Ms. Davenport. The rest is just details. Celeste felt exposed, vulnerable, and strangely exhilarated all at once. No one spoke to her like this, as if her money and power were irrelevant, as if what mattered was something deeper than balance sheets and business strategies. I should go, she said, but made no move to leave. Or, Ryan said quietly, you could let me take you for a ride, just around the block. 10 minutes of not being CEO Celeste Davenport. 10 minutes of just being Celeste. Every cautious instinct screamed warnings. This was inappropriate. He was an employee. She barely knew him. It was dangerous to trust a stranger. It was irresponsible to make decisions based on feelings instead of logic. But when was the last time she'd done something just because it made her feel alive? Just around the block, she heard herself say. Ryan's smile transformed his face and something in Celeste's chest loosened, a knot she hadn't even known she was carrying. He opened the bike's saddlebag and pulled out a second helmet. You came prepared, she noted. Hopeful, he corrected. There's a difference. He showed her how to sit, where to put her feet, how to hold on. You can hold onto the rails here, or, he hesitated. It's more stable if you hold on to me. Celeste hesitated only a moment before wrapping her arms around his waist. Through his t-shirt she could feel solid muscle, body heat, the steady rhythm of his breathing. It was the most intimate contact she'd had with another human being in months, and it shouldn't have felt as right as it did. The engine rumbled to life, vibration thrumming through her. Ryan looked back over his shoulder. You okay? She nodded, not trusting her voice. They pulled out of the garage into the golden evening light. True to his word, Ryan kept it simple. A slow cruise around the hotel property along the beachfront road where palm trees swayed and the ocean stretched infinite and blue. The wind whipped Celeste's hair, carrying the salt-sweet smell of the sea. The world reduced to this moment. The rumble of the engine, the solid warmth of Ryan's back against her chest, the rush of air and the fading sunlight painting everything gold. For 10 minutes, she wasn't CEO Celeste Davenport. She wasn't a divorced billionaire hiding in her corner office. She was just a woman on a motorcycle, feeling gloriously, terrifyingly alive. When they returned to the parking garage, Celeste's hands were shaking as she removed the helmet. Her carefully styled hair was completely disheveled. She probably looked ridiculous. She felt wonderful. Thank you, she said, and the words held weight beyond politeness. Anytime. Ryan's eyes crinkled with warmth. Sometimes we all need reminding that we're more than our roles, more than our titles. We're human beings who deserve to feel the wind in our hair. Celeste wanted to say something profound, something that matched the significance of what had just happened. But her phone buzzed insistently. 27 missed calls from Jennifer. Urgent messages about a crisis with the Chicago property. Reality crashed back. She was CEO Celeste Davenport, and she had responsibilities. I have to go, she said reluctantly. I know. He didn't look disappointed, just understanding. The empire doesn't run itself. As she walked toward her Mercedes, Celeste looked back. Ryan was already mounting his bike again, preparing to ride off into the sunset like something from a movie she'd never let herself watch because she was too busy, too focused, too hidden. Ryan, the name felt intimate on her tongue. He paused. Same time tomorrow? His smile was sunrise bright. I'll be here. The pattern established itself over the following weeks, subtle as dawn light, but just as transformative. Celeste found herself arriving at the hotel earlier, leaving slightly less late. She'd encounter Ryan in hallways and corridors, sometimes exchanging only brief nods, sometimes stopping for conversations that lasted 3 minutes, but resonated for hours afterward. He never asked about her money or her business. Instead, he asked what book she was reading. She'd started reading again, stealing moments between meetings. He asked if she'd tried the new coffee shop that opened down the street. She had, and it was better than the pretentious cafe in the hotel. He asked if she'd noticed the heron that visited the hotel's koi pond every morning at dawn. She had now, and watching it became part of her routine. The motorcycle rides became a weekly occurrence, then twice weekly. Just brief escapes. 30 minutes along the coast road, sometimes at sunset, once at sunrise when the world was pearl gray and full of possibility. They rarely talked during these rides. Words weren't necessary. The experience itself was communication. Shared silence, shared freedom, shared aliveness. The hotel staff noticed, of course. Celeste caught the glances, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. She knew what they thought. Rich, lonely divorcee finding distraction with the handsome maintenance man. The cliché of it should have bothered her. Strangely, it didn't. What bothered her was how much she looked forward to seeing Ryan, how her day felt brighter when they had one of their brief hallway conversations, how she'd catch herself watching for him, listening for the distinctive rhythm of his footsteps or the soft sound of his radio playing classical music while he worked. What bothered her was that she was starting to feel things she'd convinced herself she'd never feel again. Hope, anticipation, desire, and not just physical desire, though there was that too, simmering beneath every interaction, but desire for connection, for understanding, for someone who saw her as more than her net worth. 6 weeks after their first conversation, Celeste found herself in a board meeting that felt particularly suffocating. Arthur Pemberton, The oldest board member and her father's former business partner was pontificating about maintaining standards and appropriate hierarchy in ways that seemed pointed at her, though he never said her name. The Davenport name stands for excellence and propriety, he intoned. We must always remember that our employees look to leadership not just for business acumen, but for examples of proper conduct. Fraternization across organizational levels creates complications. He looked directly at Celeste as he said it. So the rumors had reached the board level. Celeste felt heat rising in her face, not shame but anger. How dare they judge how she spent her personal time? How dare they reduce a meaningful connection to fraternization? Is there a specific policy concern, Arthur? She asked coolly. Or are we discussing hypotheticals? I'm simply noting that appearances matter in our industry, Celeste. Your father understood that certain boundaries. My father, Celeste interrupted, voice sharp as glass, is dead. I run this company now, and unless someone has a legitimate business concern backed by actual policy violations, I suggest we return to discussing Q3 revenue projections. The room fell silent. Arthur's face reddened, but he said nothing more. The meeting continued, but Celeste barely tracked the discussion. She was too angry, too unsettled by how exposed the conversation had made her feel. They were watching her, judging her, reducing something that felt precious and private to office gossip and concern about appearances. After the meeting, she went directly to her office and closed the door, something she rarely did. She stood at the window, looking at the beach below, feeling the walls closing in again. Was this her life? Forever worrying about appearances, about what the board thought, about maintaining some fictional version of propriety while dying inside from loneliness? A knock at her door. Not now, Jennifer. It's not Jennifer. Ryan's voice. Celeste turned. He stood in her doorway in his blue uniform and yellow gloves, looking uncomfortable in her executive space but determined. You shouldn't be here, she said, but without conviction. Probably not. But you looked upset when you came back from your meeting and He paused. I wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm fine. You're lying. The simple statement broke something in her. She wasn't fine. She was tired of being fine, of being strong, of being untouchable. She was tired of living in a gilded cage of her own making, surrounded by people who saw her as a balance sheet or a scandal or a prize, never as just Celeste. They know, she said quietly. The board. About the motorcycle rides, they think I'm being inappropriate, that I'm damaging the Davenport reputation by, what? Spending time with someone who works in maintenance? As if your job defines your worth as a human being. Ryan closed the door behind him and crossed the vast office. He didn't sit in the visitor's chair like a subordinate. He leaned against her desk like an equal. My job doesn't bother you? Of course not. Then why are you upset? Because they're right to question it, Celeste burst out. Not about you being less worthy because you're a maintenance worker. That's classist garbage. But because this, she gestured between them. Whatever this is, it's not professional. I'm the CEO. You work for me. There's a power dynamic that makes everything complicated. Only if we let it. That's naive, Ryan. In the real world, he interrupted gently. Two people connected through something deeper than job titles or bank accounts. In the real world, you were lonely and I noticed. I offered friendship, maybe more, and you accepted. Everything else is just noise. Noise that could cost you your job. Noise that could damage this company's reputation. Noise that matters, Ryan. He studied her for a long moment. Do you want me to quit? What? No. Do you want to stop the motorcycle rides? Stop the conversations? No, she whispered. Then what do you want, Celeste? It was the first time he'd used her first name without the Ms. Davenport formality, and it felt simultaneously too intimate and exactly right. What did she want? The question exposed every confused, contradictory thing inside her. I want to not have to choose between being CEO and being human. I want to stop feeling like every decision is a referendum on my worth. I want. She stopped, the words caught in her throat. What? I want to not feel so goddamn alone anymore. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and vulnerable. Celeste had never said those words out loud to anyone. Not her therapist during the divorce, not her mother. Not even herself in the dark hours before dawn when loneliness felt like a physical weight on her chest. Ryan's expression softened. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was calloused from work, warm and solid and real. You're not alone, he said quietly. Not anymore. Not unless you choose to be. Celeste looked at their joined hands, her skin soft from expensive lotions, his marked with small scars from honest labor. They shouldn't fit together. Every social convention, every board member concern, every reasonable business protocol said this was wrong, but it felt more right than anything had in years. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to be vulnerable, how to let someone in, how to risk caring and being hurt again. Nobody knows how at first. We figure it out together. That's what connection is. Two imperfect people choosing each other despite the risk, despite the fear, despite all the very reasonable arguments against it. And if it goes wrong, if I get hurt again, if the board forces a choice, if, Ryan squeezed her hand gently. You can if yourself into paralysis, Celeste. Or you can take one small risk. One moment of choosing possibility over protection. Is that what you're doing? Choosing possibility? Every day I show up to work knowing I might see you. Every time we ride. Every conversation where I tell you things I've never told anyone else. Yes, I'm choosing possibility. I'm choosing to risk feeling something real even knowing it might hurt. Because the alternative is what I was doing before. Existing but not living. And that hurt worse in its own way. Celeste wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that something good could come from this impossible situation. But belief required hope. And hope required vulnerability. And vulnerability required courage she wasn't sure she possessed anymore. A soft knock at the door. They stepped apart instinctively as Jennifer entered. Ms. Davenport, you have the call with Tokyo in 5 minutes. I'll be right there. Celeste kept her voice professional, but her hand still tingled from Ryan's touch. Jennifer glanced between them, her expression carefully neutral, then left. You should go, Celeste said. Ryan nodded, but didn't move immediately. Think about what I said, about choosing possibility over protection. Life's too short to hide, Celeste. Even if it means risking pain, it's worth it for the chance it's something real. After he left, Celeste sat through the Tokyo call on autopilot, her mind replaying the conversation. Her hand still remembered the feel of his, the calluses that spoke of work and care and building things with your own hands. That evening, instead of staying at the office until 9, she left at 7. She drove home to her mansion, walked through rooms full of expensive furniture and expensive art and expensive everything, and felt the emptiness like never before. She stood in her bedroom, a space larger than most people's apartments, decorated by a professional who'd never asked what she actually liked, and made a decision. She pulled out her phone and texted a number she'd entered 6 weeks ago but never used. Ryan's personal cell. Are you free tomorrow morning? Before work? The response came quickly. Always. What do you need? A motorcycle ride. A long one. I want to see the sunrise from somewhere that isn't through a window. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, I know just the place. I'll pick you up at 5:30 a.m. Send me your address. Celeste typed out her address, then stared at the message before hitting send. This was another line crossed, giving him her home address, inviting him into her private life, making a choice that couldn't be easily walked back, choosing possibility over protection. She pressed send. The next morning, Celeste woke at 4:45 a.m. without an alarm, a first in her adult life. She dressed in jeans and a simple blue shirt, comfortable shoes, no jewelry. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. This wasn't CEO Celeste Davenport in her royal blue blazer armor. This was just Celeste. At exactly 5:30 a.m., she heard the distinctive rumble of the Harley-Davidson coming up her private drive. She grabbed her jacket and went outside before he could ring the bell, suddenly conscious of the ridiculous size of her mansion, the gated entrance, the manicured lawn that required a team of gardeners to maintain. Ryan sat astride his blue bike, 2 helmets ready. In the pre-dawn darkness, with his leather jacket and the chrome gleaming under the exterior lights, he looked like something from a dream, rugged, real, completely out of place against the backdrop of her excessive wealth. Morning, he said simply, as if picking up a billionaire CEO at her mansion at dawn was perfectly normal. Morning. Celeste took the offered helmet, their fingers brushing. Where are we going? You said you wanted to see sunrise somewhere that isn't through a window. I'm taking you to see it the way it's meant to be seen. They rode north along the coast road, the city still sleeping, the ocean dark and vast beside them. The pre-dawn air was cool against Celeste's face, and she held onto Ryan's waist, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way he leaned into curves like he and the bike were one entity. They rode for 45 minutes, leaving the city behind, following a winding road that climbed into low hills. Finally, Ryan turned onto a small dirt path that led to an overlook. He parked the bike, and they dismounted, Celeste's legs slightly unsteady after the long ride. Come on, Ryan said. taking her hand naturally as if they'd been holding hands for years instead of twice. He led her to the edge of the overlook. Below them, the ocean stretched endlessly, dark water meeting dark sky at an invisible horizon. Behind them, the land rolled in gentle hills. They were alone except for a few early birds beginning their morning songs. They waited in comfortable silence as the sky slowly, impossibly, began to lighten. First a thin line of pale gray, then pink, then gold. The sun emerged from the ocean like a promise being kept, painting the water with liquid light. The birds sang louder, welcoming the day. The world transformed from darkness to color, from night to morning, from one possibility to another. Celeste felt tears on her cheeks, the first she'd cried in over 2 years. They weren't sad tears. They were the tears of someone remembering what beauty looked like, what wonder felt like, what it meant to witness something magnificent that couldn't be bought or controlled or managed, only experienced. Ryan didn't comment on the tears. He just held her hand and stood beside her as the sunrise painted them both in gold. "Thank you," Celeste whispered. "For what?" "For reminding me that I'm human, that there's more to life than corner offices and board meetings, that beauty exists outside spreadsheets. You didn't need reminding. You just needed permission to remember." They stood together until the sun cleared the horizon fully until the day officially began. Then Ryan led her back to the bike, but before they mounted, he turned to face her. "Celeste, I need to tell you something." Something in his tone made her heart quicken. "Okay. I didn't take this job at the Melbrook randomly. I took it because—" He paused, seeming to struggle with words for the first time since she'd known him. "Because I needed to see you again. Because 20 years ago, before your life became limousines and board meetings and billion-dollar empires, you were my best friend, and I never forgot you." The world tilted. Celeste stared at him, her mind racing, pulling apart his features and reassembling them into a memory she'd buried so deep. She'd almost convinced herself it was imaginary. Ryan Walker? The name suddenly made sense, connected to a boy with kind eyes who'd lived in the apartment building next to her father's first hotel. A boy who'd shared his sandwiches when she forgot her lunch, who'd taught her to skip rocks at the beach, who'd been her only real friend during the year her mother was sick. They'd been 7 years old, and he'd been the son of the hotel's maintenance man, a detail her father's business partner had considered inappropriate. The families had been separated. She'd never seen Ryan again, until now. "You remembered?" she whispered. "I never forgot. Not for one day in 20 years. Not when I joined the Navy. Not when I rebuilt my life after service. Not when I saw your face on Forbes magazine and realized you'd grown up to be even more beautiful than I remembered. But sadder. So much sadder. And I thought maybe." He stopped, vulnerable in a way that made her heart ache. "Maybe I could remind you of who you were before the world taught you to hide. Before you learned that being rich meant being alone. You came back for me. It wasn't a question. I came back for us. For the possibility of us. I know it's crazy. I know 20 years is a lifetime. I know I'm a maintenance worker and you're a CEO and the world will say it's impossible. But Celeste," he cupped her face in his calloused hands. "That little girl who shared her dreams with a boy who had nothing. She's still in there. I see her when you smile at wildflowers. I see her when you ride on my bike with your hair flying wild. I see her when you watch the sunrise and remember what wonder feels like." "I thought I'd never see you again," Celeste said, tears streaming freely now. "I thought you were just a beautiful memory from before everything got complicated. I'm real. I'm here. And I'm asking you to choose possibility over protection. Choose the messy, complicated, imperfect chance that 2 kids who were best friends might become adults who love each other. Choose to risk your heart one more time." Every logical voice in Celeste's head screamed warnings. This was too fast, too risky, too impossible. The board would be scandalized. Her mother would be horrified. Marcus would probably laugh at the predictability of the rich woman falling for the working man. Society would judge. Business would suffer. Logic dictated retreat. But logic had kept her safe and miserable. Logic had built walls so high, she'd forgotten what sky looked like from the outside. "I don't know how," she admitted. "I don't know how to be that vulnerable again. Start small. Start with telling me the truth. What do you want right now in this moment?" Celeste looked at Ryan, at the boy who'd been her first friend, at the man who'd crossed 20 years and social barriers to find her again, at the person who saw her not as untouchable heiress, but as human being worthy of love. "I want to kiss you," she whispered. "I want to stop being afraid. I want to choose possibility." Ryan smiled, that sunrise bright smile that had been warming something frozen inside her for 6 weeks. "Then choose it." And she did. She kissed him as the sun rose over the ocean, as birds sang their greeting to the day, as the world transformed from darkness to light. She kissed him and felt walls crumbling, felt armor sliding away, felt herself becoming someone she'd almost forgotten existed, someone capable of hope, of trust, of love. When they finally pulled apart, Ryan rested his forehead against hers. I've waited 20 years for that. Was it worth it? Every single day of waiting. They rode back to the city in the full light of morning, Celeste holding on to Ryan and feeling for the first time in years like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The complications would come, board concerns, social judgment, logistical challenges of navigating a relationship across such different worlds. But in that moment, riding through the sunrise with the boy who'd become the man who saw her truly, Celeste Davenport chose possibility, chose vulnerability, chose life, and it felt like coming home. The following 3 weeks felt like living in two worlds simultaneously. In one world, Celeste was the CEO navigating Q4 strategy, approving budgets, managing board expectations. In the other, she was the woman who met Ryan before dawn for motorcycle rides, who learned that his favorite book was Meditations, because it taught him about controlling what you can and accepting what you can't, who discovered he volunteered at a veterans shelter every Saturday because everyone deserves to feel seen. They kept it quiet, meeting outside the hotel, avoiding obvious displays at work, but hiding felt wrong, like denying something precious and real, and people noticed anyway. The knowing looks from staff, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms, the way Arthur Pemberton watched her during board meetings with barely concealed disapproval. It all came to a head on a Thursday afternoon when Celeste was summoned to an emergency board meeting she hadn't called. "This is highly irregular," she said as she entered the conference room where all 7 board members waited. "I wasn't informed of any scheduled meeting." Arthur Pemberton sat at the head of the table, her seat. "We felt this matter required immediate attention. Please sit, Celeste." She remained standing. "What matter?" "Your relationship with an employee, specifically Ryan Walker from Maintenance Services." Arthur slid a folder across the table. "We have documentation of numerous instances of fraternization, motorcycle rides, personal meetings, visits to your private residence." Celeste's blood ran cold. They'd been watching her, documenting her private life like some kind of corporate investigation. "My personal relationships are not board business. They are when they create liability for this company." Another board member, Patricia Chen, interjected. "There are power dynamic concerns, potential harassment claims, reputational risks." "Harassment?" Celeste's voice rose. "This is a consensual relationship between 2 adults, one of whom works for the other," Arthur said coldly. "One of whom is CEO while the other pushes a mop. The optics are disastrous, Celeste. Your father built this company on respectability, on maintaining certain standards." "My father," Celeste interrupted, her voice shaking with fury, "built this company on hard work and treating people with dignity regardless of their job title. He started as a maintenance worker himself, if you've forgotten. Or has that become inconvenient to your narrative?" The room fell silent. It was true. James Davenport had begun his career cleaning hotel rooms, saving every penny until he could buy his first failing property and turn it around. He'd never forgotten where he came from, had always treated every employee with respect. But he'd also worked himself to death by 58, dying of a heart attack in the same office where Celeste now sat. "Your father also understood appropriate professional boundaries," Arthur continued. "We're not asking you to end your association with Mr. Walker. We're simply requiring that he be transferred to another property. The Chicago hotel needs maintenance staff. He can start there next week. You're forcing him out. We're protecting the company, and frankly protecting you from a decision you'll regret. This man is clearly interested in your wealth." "Stop." Celeste's voice was ice. "You don't know him. You don't know anything about this." "We know enough," Patricia said, not unkindly. "Celeste, we understand you've been lonely since the divorce, but this isn't the answer. Men like Ryan Walker." "Men like Ryan Walker?" Celeste repeated dangerously. "Please finish that sentence. Tell me exactly what you think about men who work with their hands, men who weren't born into wealth, men who rebuild motorcycles and read philosophy and notice when someone is suffering. This is about protecting corporate interests," Arthur said firmly. "The decision is made. Walker will be offered the Chicago transfer with a salary increase. If he declines, his employment will be terminated. This meeting is adjourned." They filed out, leaving Celeste standing alone in the conference room, fury and fear warring inside her. They were forcing her to choose, the company or Ryan, her legacy or her heart. Everything she'd built, or everything she'd just begun to feel again. She found Ryan in his usual afternoon spot, waxing the West Wing floors, his radio playing Bach. He looked up as she approached, his smile fading when he saw her expression. What happened? The board knows they're transferring you to Chicago or firing you. They think you're using me for my money. They think this is about power dynamics and liability. They think, her voice broke. They're making me choose. Ryan stood, setting aside his equipment. Then choose. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. It's the simplest thing in the world, Celeste. Either you believe in us or you don't. Either you're willing to fight for something real, or you're going to let fear and propriety dictate your life again. This is my father's legacy. This company is a building full of furniture and spreadsheets, Ryan said quietly. It's not your father. It's not your worth. It's not your life unless you let it be. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who'd be losing everything. The words came out harsher than she intended, and she saw them land like physical blows. Ryan's expression shifted. Not anger, but something deeper. Disappointment. You're right, he said softly. I'm just losing you. That's all. Just the woman I've loved since I was 7 years old. Just the only person who made me believe in second chances. Just my best friend who became the love of my life. But you're losing a company, so obviously my loss is insignificant. Ryan, I didn't mean... Yes, you did. And maybe you're right to mean it. Maybe I've been foolish thinking love could bridge the gap between our worlds. Maybe your board is right. I'm just the maintenance man and you're the billionaire CEO. And those two things don't mix no matter how much we want them to. Please don't do this. I'm not doing anything, Celeste. I'm just finally seeing clearly. You have to decide who you are. Are you the woman who watched the sunrise with me and remembered what wonder felt like? Or are you the CEO who will sacrifice everything real for the appearance of respectability? He picked up his equipment. I'll make it easy for you. I quit. Effective immediately. You don't have to choose between me and your company because I'm removing myself from the equation. Ryan, wait. But he was already walking away, his blue uniform disappearing down the corridor, leaving her standing alone in the West Wing with Bach still playing softly from his abandoned radio. Celeste stood frozen for several minutes, her mind reeling. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to fight for him, to tell the board to go to hell, to choose love over legacy. But fear held her paralyzed. Fear of losing the company her father built. Fear of being wrong. Fear of proving the board right. Fear of being hurt again. She returned to her office and sat at her father's desk, her desk now, and looked at the photo she kept in the drawer. Her father, young and smiling, standing in front of his first hotel. Behind him, barely visible, was a small boy helping him carry cleaning supplies. She'd never paid attention to that detail before, but now she pulled the photo closer, studying the boy's face. It was Ryan's father, and next to him, holding a child's hand, was 7-year-old Ryan. Her father had known the Walkers, had worked alongside them, had treated them as equals, as friends, as people worthy of respect and dignity. James Davenport hadn't built his empire by maintaining class barriers. He'd built it by breaking them down, by remembering where he came from, by treating every person as valuable regardless of their position. And she'd been about to betray everything he actually stood for to protect a legacy that the board had distorted into something he'd never intended. Celeste pulled out her phone and typed a message to the board members. Emergency meeting. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Attendance mandatory. We're going to discuss what the Davenport legacy actually means. Then she grabbed her keys and ran. She found Ryan at the overlook where they'd watched the sunrise. His Harley was parked at the edge, and he sat on the ground, looking out at the ocean as the sun set, the opposite end of the day from where they'd begun. Celeste approached slowly, her heart pounding. He didn't turn around. I'm sorry, she said quietly. You're right. About everything. I was choosing fear over possibility. I was letting them dictate who I am. It's okay, Ryan said, but his voice was hollow. I understand. You have responsibilities. Stop. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Let me finish. I was wrong, and I'm sorry, and I love you. I've probably loved you since we were 7 years old and you shared your peanut butter sandwich with me even though it was all you had for lunch. I definitely love you now, as the man who rebuilt himself piece by piece like his Harley, who sees me as more than my bank account, who reminded me what it means to be alive. Ryan turned to look at her, hope and hurt warring in his expression. What about the board? The company? Tomorrow morning I'm going to walk into that meeting and tell them exactly what the Davenport legacy really is. It's dignity in all work. It's treating people as valuable regardless of their title. It's my father, who started as a janitor and never forgot it, working alongside your father, who he considered a friend. It's breaking down barriers, not maintaining them. And if they can't accept that, if they try to force me to choose between the company and my values, then they can run the company themselves. I'll resign. Celeste, you can't. I can. I will. Because you're right. It's just a company. It's furniture and spreadsheets and quarterly earnings. And you, her voice broke. You're real. You're the person who sees me. You're my best friend and my second chance and my choice. I'm choosing possibility, Ryan. I'm choosing us. Even if it costs me everything else. You'd give up your empire? For you? In a heartbeat. But I don't think I'll have to. I think my father built something stronger than the board gives it credit for. I think the Davenport name can survive its CEO being human, being in love, being brave enough to fight for what matters. Ryan pulled her close, and she felt his heart beating against hers, solid and real and right. They sat together as the sun painted the sky in fire colors, as day surrendered to night, as endings became beginnings. I love you too, Ryan whispered. I've loved you for 20 years. I'll love you for 20 more, for however long you'll have me. Forever then. I choose forever. They kissed as the stars began to appear, as the ocean sang its eternal song, as two broken people became something whole together. The next morning, Celeste walked into the board meeting wearing jeans, a simple blue shirt, and her father's old watch, not her usual armor of blazers and designer clothes. The board members stared. Thank you for coming, she said, remaining standing at the head of the table. I have some things to say and then you'll have a decision to make. She pulled out the photograph of her father. James Davenport started as a janitor. He built this company not by maintaining class barriers but by breaking them down, by treating every employee with dignity, by believing that a person's worth isn't determined by their job title but by their character. She looked at each board member. Yesterday, you tried to make me choose between this company and a good man. You tried to tell me that maintaining appropriate boundaries was more important than authentic connection. You were wrong. Arthur started to object, but Celeste held up her hand. I'm not finished. I'm in love with Ryan Walker. He's a veteran, a mechanical genius, a philosopher, and the best man I've ever known. The fact that he works in maintenance doesn't diminish him. It honors him. Manual labor has dignity. Service has dignity. And if this board can't see that, then you don't deserve to steward my father's legacy. Celeste, Patricia began. Here's your choice. Celeste continued. You can accept that I will live my life according to my values, not your prejudices. You can trust that I'll continue to run this company with the same dedication and success I've shown for 5 years. Or you can ask for my resignation, and I'll give it gladly. But I will not hide who I love. I will not pretend Ryan is less than he is to make you comfortable. I will not betray my father's actual values to maintain your fictional version of respectability. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Patricia spoke. Your father would be proud of you. Excuse me. James talked about you constantly, about how brilliant you were, how strong, how capable, but he worried you'd forget to be human in the pursuit of success, that you'd let the business consume you the way it consumed him. Patricia smiled. He'd be proud that you're choosing to be both, strong CEO and vulnerable human being. I vote to support you. No restrictions, no transfers, no interference in your personal life. Seconded, another board member said. One by one they voted. Only Arthur abstained, his face red with suppressed anger. Motion passes, Patricia said. Now let's discuss Q4 projections and stop wasting time on gossip. The meeting continued as if nothing had happened, but everything had changed. That evening, Celeste found Ryan working on his Harley in his apartment's parking lot. He looked up as she approached, grease-stained but beautiful in the golden hour light. How'd it go? He asked carefully. I still have a job and I still have you. If you'll have me after I almost chose wrong. Ryan stood wiping his hands on a rag. Always. I'll always choose you, Celeste. In any world, in any lifetime. Even when I'm scared and stupid. Especially then. We all get scared. The brave thing is choosing love anyway. She kissed him, tasting courage and second chances and futures that stretched before them like open roads. Take me for a ride? She asked. Anywhere you want to go. They rode through the city as night fell, Celeste holding tight to the man who'd waited 20 years to find her again. They rode past the hotel where they'd reconnected, past the overlook where they'd watched the sunrise, past the mansion where she'd lived alone for too long. They rode toward a future that wouldn't be perfect or easy, where judgments and challenges would continue, but they'd face it together, the CEO and the mechanic, the billionaire and the janitor, two childhood friends who'd grown into adults brave enough to fight for love across any barrier. When Ryan finally parked the Harley, they were at the beach where they'd skipped rocks as children. The same beach, the same ocean, but everything transformed. Ready to start our next chapter? Ryan asked. Celeste looked at him, at the boy who'd shared his sandwich, at the man who'd rebuilt himself piece by piece, at the person who'd reminded her what it meant to be beautifully, messily, courageously human. I've been ready for 20 years, she said. I just didn't know it until now. They walked toward the water hand in hand, leaving footprints in the sand, evidence that they'd been here, that they'd chosen each other, that love had won against every reasonable argument to the contrary. The waves erased their footprints eventually, as waves do. But some things, connection, courage, the choice to love despite fear, those things endured. Those things became the real legacy. And that was enough. More than enough. That was everything.